When people think of Mexican food, they often picture tacos loaded with cheese, sizzling fajitas, and burritos the size of a football. Yet what most of us are served at major restaurant chains is far from the rich, soulful tradition that defines true Mexican cuisine. Authentic Mexican food is built on centuries of culture, family recipes, and natural ingredients that speak to the land and the people who cultivate it. Unfortunately, many fast food and casual dining chains have distorted that image, turning something deeply cultural into a fast, cheap, and highly processed imitation that barely resembles its origins. The difference between authentic Mexican food and the Americanized version isn't just about flavor. It's about integrity, nutrition, and respect for the craft of cooking. In real Mexican kitchens, every dish begins with simplicity and purpose. The corn for tortillas is soaked, ground, and shaped by hand. The beans are slow-cooked, seasoned with herbs, and infused with thyme, not artificial flavor packets. The salsas burst with life. Fresh tomatoes, onions, cilantro, and chili peppers ground together to create a harmony of spice and aroma. But in most fast food Mexican restaurants, this artistry disappears. Instead, the focus shifts to speed, shelf life, and uniformity. The tortillas come frozen, the beans come from a can, and the salsas are bottled long before they reach your plate. What's lost in this process isn't just authenticity. It's the very soul of the food. The problem runs deeper than just taste. When restaurants replace natural ingredients with processed alternatives, they strip away nutritional value and replace it with chemicals, fillers, and preservatives. The meats are often pre-seasoned with sodium-heavy mixtures designed to mask the lack of freshness. The cheese isn't real cheese but a processed blend that melts unnaturally smooth because it's laced with stabilizers. Even the rice, which should be fluffy and fragrant, is often instant rice soaked in oil to extend its shelf life. These shortcuts might make production faster, but they also create food that is harder for the body to digest and far less nourishing than it should be. What's sold as a fun, flavorful meal is really a manufactured product engineered to taste acceptable while cutting costs at every corner. This Americanized version of Mexican food also reshapes the way people think about the culture itself. When someone's only exposure to Mexican cuisine is a drive-through taco or a microwaved burrito, they develop a false impression of what the cuisine truly represents. Mexican food is one of the most diverse and sophisticated in the world, blending ancient indigenous practices with Spanish influences to create a balance of flavor and meaning. Each region of Mexico has its own identity: the smoky moles of Oaxaca, the seafood ceviches of the coast, the spicy salsas of Jalisco. To reduce that to a crunchy taco shell filled with ground beef and shredded lettuce is not just culinary laziness. It's cultural oversimplification. Authentic Mexican cuisine is not fast food. It's a story, a ritual, and a connection to heritage that cannot be replicated in a corporate kitchen. Another layer of deception lies in marketing. Many chain restaurants use Mexican imagery, sombreros, chili peppers, mariachi music, to make their menus seem authentic. But these symbols are superficial. They give the illusion of cultural respect while serving food that has little to do with the tradition they claim to represent. It's a kind of culinary misrepresentation that teaches customers to equate branding with authenticity. People assume that because something is wrapped in a tortilla or sprinkled with jalapenos, it must be Mexican. But true authenticity can't be faked with decorations or clever advertising. It comes from fresh ingredients, traditional preparation, and genuine respect for the cuisine. This doesn't mean that innovation or modernization has no place in food. Fusion cuisine can be beautiful when done with care and respect. The problem arises when shortcuts replace skill and when speed replaces quality. Authentic Mexican food doesn't need to be overly fancy or expensive. It needs to be real. Street vendors in Mexico serve some of the most flavorful dishes on the planet using basic ingredients and old methods. Their tacos al pastor or tamales carry more authenticity and love than anything mass-produced in a chain kitchen. It's a reminder that true food culture is never about convenience. It's about connection. Every time you choose authentic over artificial, you honor the people who created the food's legacy. You support the farmers who grow real produce, the cooks who still grind spices by hand, and the culture that continues to thrive despite commercialization. Authentic Mexican food tells a story with every bite, one rooted in patience, craft, and community. When restaurants strip that away, they take something sacred and turn it into just another product. That's why knowing the difference matters, not just for your taste buds, but for your appreciation of an entire culture that deserves better than a processed version of its soul. The idea of getting a quick, satisfying meal for just a few dollars feels tempting, especially when hunger strikes and convenience calls louder than caution. But what often hides behind that low price tag is a high cost that doesn't appear on the receipt. Many fast food Mexican chains lure customers with affordability, bright menus, and value deals. Yet they rely on ultra-processed ingredients, low-quality meats, and chemical additives that slowly erode health over time. What seems like a harmless meal choice today can become part of a long-term pattern that affects energy, digestion, and overall well-being. The real cost of cheap food is invisible until the effects start to show up in the body and mind. Most of these budget-friendly meals are engineered for flavor, not nutrition. Companies use salt, sugar, and artificial seasonings to make up for the lack of freshness in their ingredients. When a taco costs less than a cup of coffee, it's usually because the food isn't made from scratch. It's assembled from pre-cooked, pre-frozen, and chemically preserved components that can sit in storage for months. The meat is often treated with fillers to stretch supply and enhance texture. The cheese comes from processed blocks designed to melt perfectly under heat lamps. And even the sauces are thickened with stabilizers instead of real vegetables. Each shortcut saves the company a few cents, but the consumer pays for it in ways that go far beyond the wallet. These hidden costs often reveal themselves through health. Excess sodium in these foods can lead to dehydration, bloating, and long-term blood pressure issues. High levels of saturated fats contribute to sluggishness and increased cholesterol, while chemical additives confuse the body's natural hunger cues, leading to overeating. Over time, this diet of cheap convenience meals can lead to fatigue, weight gain, and an unhealthy relationship with food. The irony is that people often turn to these meals because they're affordable and accessible, but in the long run, they end up costing far more through medical bills, lost energy, and diminished quality of life. Cheap food creates expensive problems, and most of them don't show up until much later. Beyond the physical impact, there's also a mental and emotional cost. Real, wholesome food nourishes not only the body, but also the mind. It gives a sense of satisfaction and balance, a quiet reminder that you've chosen to care for yourself. In contrast, processed food delivers a fleeting rush of pleasure, followed by fatigue and discomfort. The body recognizes the difference between nourishment and imitation. Each time you settle for something low in quality, you reinforce the habit of accepting less. Less flavor, less care, less value for what you consume. It becomes a cycle where convenience replaces consciousness, and eating becomes just another quick task rather than a meaningful experience. The restaurant industry thrives on this trade-off. They know most people crave comfort and speed, so they design meals that hit those desires instantly. But behind the shiny photos and catchy slogans are industrial kitchens where food is produced, not cooked. What you're really paying for isn't the ingredients, it's the marketing. That sense of satisfaction you feel after biting into a greasy burrito is the result of carefully engineered flavors meant to trick your brain into craving more. It's a controlled illusion, a shortcut to pleasure that eventually dulls your ability to taste real food. Once you've been conditioned to expect that kind of stimulation, fresh and natural meals can start to feel bland, even though they're what your body truly needs. There's also a deeper social cost. Every dollar spent on mass-produced, low-quality food supports a system that values profit over people. It fuels industries that underpay workers, cut corners on sourcing, and flood communities with processed products instead of supporting local farms and small eateries that honor traditional cooking. When you choose cheap food, you're not just affecting your health, you're indirectly supporting the degradation of food culture itself. Authentic Mexican cuisine, once a proud expression of heritage and artistry, gets reduced to a fast food stereotype designed to sell volume rather than quality. The choice between cheap and real food isn't just a matter of money. It's a statement about what kind of food culture we want to sustain. It's easy to believe that a restaurant with colorful decor, upbeat music, and a lively atmosphere must be serving quality food. Many chains use this illusion to their advantage, building a brand image so convincing that customers rarely question what's really on their plate. But behind the glossy menus and perfectly plated dishes often lies a very different reality, one where frozen ingredients, canned sauces, and prepackaged meals dominate the kitchen. The truth is that branding can disguise mediocrity. What looks authentic on the surface is sometimes just a clever performance designed to make you feel like you're eating something genuine when, in fact, it's all an act. A strong brand can create trust even when the product doesn't deserve it. Restaurants spend millions perfecting the image of authenticity, using Mexican-inspired names, traditional colors, and familiar symbols to trigger emotional associations with real Mexican culture. You might see images of cornfields, families, or chili peppers printed across their walls, suggesting freshness and tradition. Yet most of the time, the ingredients behind the scenes tell a different story. The rice is frozen, the beans come from industrial suppliers, and the meats are cooked in bulk and reheated throughout the day. The presentation is crafted to make you feel like you're eating something meaningful. But the reality is often a highly efficient operation built on cutting costs and maximizing profits. This disconnect between image and substance is what traps so many customers. People associate comfort and consistency with quality. When they see the same logo, the same slogans, and the same bright colors across multiple cities, they assume reliability. The brand becomes a psychological shortcut, a promise that what you see is what you'll get. But that promise is fragile because it's not rooted in quality. It's rooted in repetition. Chains like On the Border or El Torito built reputations decades ago, and many customers still hold on to the nostalgia of those early years. They remember a time when the food might have been made from scratch, but they don't realize how much has changed as ownership and priorities shifted over time. What happens behind the kitchen door is rarely what the brand suggests. Pre-chopped vegetables arrive in vacuum-sealed bags, sauces are pumped from industrial containers, and meats are pre-cooked in central facilities before being shipped to locations nationwide. This assembly line approach ensures that every plate looks and tastes the same, no matter where you are, but it also strips away the soul of real cooking. True flavor requires freshness, skill, and attention to detail, all of which take time. Corporate restaurants don't have the luxury of time because their business model prioritizes speed and consistency. As a result, customers are left with food that looks appealing but tastes hollow, offering instant gratification without any depth or authenticity. The illusion of quality is maintained not by what's cooked, but by what's marketed. The glowing menu photos, the sizzling sound effects, and the vibrant descriptions all serve one purpose: to distract you from what's missing. It's a performance that plays on your senses. You hear the sizzle of fajitas as they arrive at the table, but the sound was created in the kitchen by pouring oil on a hot plate, not by cooking fresh meat. You taste bold seasoning, but that flavor often comes from pre-made spice blends instead of fresh herbs or roasted chilies. Everything is designed to give you a momentary impression of quality without ever delivering it. When people rely on branding to judge their meals, they lose touch with their instincts about food. Authentic cooking isn't flashy. It's felt in the aroma, the texture, and the way a dish makes you feel afterward. Real Mexican food doesn't need a marketing campaign to convince you it's good. It speaks for itself through freshness and simplicity. Yet the modern food industry thrives on creating illusions that appeal to emotion rather than truth. Customers fall for it because the experience feels comforting. But comfort is not the same as quality. The more we learn to look beyond the brand image, the more we start to see the difference between food that's made for marketing and food that's made with care. It takes awareness to realize that authenticity can't be mass-produced. A true meal doesn't depend on a logo. It depends on the honesty of its ingredients and the hands that prepare it. When the brand becomes more important than the food, the essence of the cuisine gets lost, replaced by an imitation that looks convincing but leaves you empty. Brand image has a powerful way of shaping perception, often convincing people that what looks authentic must also taste authentic. The restaurant industry understands this psychological trigger and uses it skillfully to mask the lack of real quality behind glossy menus and vibrant aesthetics. When customers walk into a restaurant filled with Mexican-inspired decorations, murals of chili peppers, and upbeat Latin music, they immediately associate the environment with genuine Mexican flavor. Yet what happens in the kitchen often tells a very different story. Many of these establishments use mass-produced sauces, frozen vegetables, and pre-seasoned meats designed for uniformity rather than freshness. The illusion of authenticity becomes part of the experience, a crafted image that satisfies the eyes but not the palate. This is one of the biggest traps in modern dining, the belief that presentation equals substance. Large restaurant chains invest heavily in branding because it's easier to sell an image than to deliver consistent quality. They hire marketing teams, not culinary artisans, to build the story of their food. The branding creates emotional trust, and that trust keeps people from asking questions about how their food is made. For many of these chains, the idea of authentic Mexican flavor is reduced to a formula of melted cheese, bright sauces, and a sprinkle of spice. It's an illusion built on nostalgia and expectation, rather than tradition and craftsmanship. Customers are seduced by familiarity, not by genuine culinary depth. Behind the kitchen doors, efficiency replaces artistry. Meals are assembled in minutes because every ingredient is designed for convenience. Frozen rice, canned beans, pre-cooked meats, and flavoring powders to replicate seasoning. What's missing is the human touch, the slow and intentional process that defines real Mexican cuisine. The tortillas aren't pressed fresh. They're delivered in stacks of plastic. The guacamole isn't mashed from ripe avocados each morning. It's squeezed out of a bag mixed with preservatives. Yet the restaurant's logo and atmosphere convince customers that they're experiencing something authentic. This is how branding creates a comforting illusion, one that replaces real flavor with theatrics. People often confuse consistency with quality. When a chain restaurant serves the same dish across hundreds of locations, it gives a sense of reliability. You know exactly what to expect. But that predictability comes at a cost. Real food changes with the season, the ingredients, and the cook's hand. It has character and life because it's made from something fresh. When food becomes standardized, it loses that spark. The same dish that once came from a family recipe now comes from a corporate manual. This is where the gap between brand image and quality becomes undeniable. The food may look the same as it did years ago, but it no longer carries the same authenticity. Marketing fills that gap. Restaurants use descriptive language, fire-grilled, handcrafted, freshly made, to give the impression of care, even when none is actually present. The average diner reads those words and assumes the process still honors the spirit of homemade cooking. In reality, these terms are strategically chosen by advertisers to evoke emotion, not honesty. The sizzle you hear when fajitas hit your table isn't the sound of a fresh skillet. It's a preheated trick used to make your meal seem freshly prepared. The aromas that make you hungry are often the result of artificial flavorings designed to trigger your senses. Every element from lighting to sound is manipulated to sell a feeling rather than food. It's only when you strip away the marketing that you see how fragile that illusion really is. Authenticity can't be manufactured. It comes from intention, tradition, and respect for ingredients. True Mexican cuisine tells a story of land and labor, corn that's nixtamalized, sauces ground by hand, and recipes that carry generations of memory. When restaurants abandon those roots in favor of speed and branding, they serve an imitation that looks real, but lacks substance. The brand might be recognizable, but recognition isn't the same as truth. Real food doesn't need to advertise its authenticity. It shows it through flavor, freshness, and sincerity that no marketing budget can replicate. The word fresh has become one of the most abused terms in the food industry. It's painted across menus, shouted in commercials, and printed in bold letters on packaging to create an illusion of health and authenticity. But what most customers don't realize is that the word rarely means what it suggests. Many restaurants that claim to serve fresh food rely on prepackaged, vacuum-sealed, and chemically treated ingredients that are anything but natural. The problem is that the label of freshness is easy to fake. It doesn't have to be verified, and it doesn't require proof. It simply has to sound good enough to convince people that what they're eating is made with care, even when it's not. Restaurants that boast about freshness often follow the same formula. They use buzzwords like farm to table, locally sourced, or made daily to suggest quality. But behind the scenes, much of the food comes from industrial suppliers that distribute to hundreds of other chains. The lettuce is pre-chopped and stored in plastic bags to extend its shelf life. The chicken is marinated in preservatives to stay tender for days. The sauces are prepared in large batches at off-site facilities, then reheated at the restaurant and labeled as house-made. It's a system designed for efficiency, not flavor. The word fresh becomes part of the marketing vocabulary, not the cooking process. Customers trust what they see. When food arrives at the table looking colorful and vibrant, it's easy to assume it was made from scratch. A few slices of avocado or a sprig of cilantro can create the illusion of authenticity, even if the core of the meal is mass-produced. What most people don't realize is that appearances can be engineered. Food stylists and marketing teams work tirelessly to make dishes look appealing on menus and advertisements. But the product that arrives at your table often has little in common with the images that convinced you to order it. The word fresh is used not to describe the ingredients, but to describe the feeling they want you to have when you eat it. True freshness isn't something that can be faked. It's a reflection of time and intention. In real Mexican cooking, freshness is about the immediacy of preparation. The salsa is made that morning, the tortillas are pressed moments before serving, and the vegetables are chopped just before they hit the pan. It's a rhythm that comes from respect for ingredients and from understanding how flavor changes with time. Freshness has a heartbeat. It lives and fades quickly. That's why traditional cooks value timing as much as taste. But in a restaurant chain where everything is prepped in bulk and stored for convenience, that heartbeat is long gone. What remains is food that looks fresh on the surface but feels lifeless when you eat it. When freshness becomes just another marketing term, people start losing their ability to tell the difference between real and artificial flavor. A tomato that's been sitting in cold storage for a week can't compare to one picked that morning. But the modern food system has conditioned people to accept that difference as normal. The body, however, still knows. You can taste the difference in the way real food nourishes, the way it feels lighter, cleaner, and more balanced. Processed food leaves you full but unsatisfied, craving something you can't quite name because what's missing isn't just flavor, it's life. This illusion of freshness also disconnects people from the culture behind the cuisine. Authentic Mexican food is rooted in freshness by necessity. The ingredients are local, seasonal, and alive with character. When restaurants replace that with plastic-packaged convenience, they're not just diluting flavor, they're diluting history. Every shortcut taken in the name of profit strips away a small part of the story that made the food special in the first place. Real freshness takes effort, and effort takes care. That's something no slogan or advertisement can replicate. Because true freshness isn't a label. It's a promise kept in every bite. Despite the number of disappointing and artificial versions of Mexican food that fill the fast food landscape, there are still places that hold on to integrity, proving that good food can be both quick and authentic. These restaurants understand that people want convenience without compromise, and they've found a way to balance both. Chipotle and Qdoba, for example, show that you can serve meals on the go without drowning them in preservatives or artificial ingredients. They remind us that fast food doesn't have to be fake food. It can still carry a sense of care, flavor, and authenticity if the process behind it is rooted in transparency and respect for what real food should be. Chipotle built its reputation on a simple but powerful idea: food with integrity. The company didn't invent Mexican cuisine, but it reintroduced the concept of responsibility to fast dining. By sourcing high-quality meats using real vegetables and letting customers customize their meals, it gave people back a sense of choice and control. That kind of openness matters. When you can see your food being prepared right in front of you, there's no room for mystery or deception. You watch every ingredient as it's added, and that small act of visibility builds trust. It's not just about flavor, it's about honesty. Chipotle's commitment to using fewer processed items and avoiding artificial additives shows that large-scale operations can still care about quality if they choose to.